Yesterday we talked about how the first 10 minutes of the game was like super important. As a consumer, we really think so highly about the first 10 minutes of a game since it's the first impression. First impressions are super important in everything. It could be a show, friendship, even listening to music. The first few seconds are almost always the most important. Do you really want to waste a minute or two on meaningless crawling on your video game? Like, seriously? Present your game as much as possible, as quickly as possible. This game is impressive. Number one, they immediately started out with a small combat thingy, like you can bonk or jump on top of the enemy to deal damage. Then they gave me a gun immediately. They showed me my skill immediately. Even the first minute was full of combat. They didn't waste no time. Each class has its own specific abilities and talents. I kind of want to say something about this. So I talked about how games did not try hard enough to be a good entry point for genres. Not only are the Souls-like fans going to play your game, but also people who have no idea about the genre as well. So you have to appeal to them as well. Whatever type of content you create, you have to keep in mind that people who has no idea about the content will also try and consume it at some point. You see, I think Souls-like games should try to be the best entry game for someone who has never played a Souls-like. I think people who play too much into the content they're trying to create kind of forget that they also have to make sure that they offer a nice entry point for the people who have never seen that type of game. That's why we get these super complicated games that are super oversaturated with information, and most of the time the game assumes you have that type of information. Like, oh sure buddy, like if you play our game you most definitely have played another game of this genre. Perhaps I have not. You know, perhaps I only have seen some visuals, perhaps one of my friends recommended the game to me, but I have never ever seen any other game from this genre. And I think most developers overlook that part and they just go for easy picks from people who are super into their genre. That's why they don't put understandable, clear tutorials in their video games, make themselves clear about their goals, make sure people understand what the game is. No, they most of the time say, okay, if you don't understand that, you probably are not the right audience for us anyway. This never works. I was about to say this would work only sometime. No, I don't think it would ever work. Example was about to be Paradox games or other strategy games like that. You probably are a fan of strategy games anyway if you're trying out Paradox games like Europa Universalis or Hearts of Iron. But then I realized, in order to be a fan of the strategy games, you also have to start from somewhere. Like, you have to first play one of the games anyway. I think that's more than enough reason to make every single one of them more accessible to as many people as possible. I think this game is super good as an entry point. Guys, they even explain what a class is. For someone who has played video games for the past 19 years like me, you might think that this is kind of obvious. I mean, it's a class, what can it do? But for someone who has never touched a video game, it's kind of important to understand. I think that's super important that they include something basic like that in the game.